In the first half of my life, not a single word of tragedy was enough to describe. My biological father abandoned me, my biological mother abused me, and I was abandoned in an orphanage for 10 years. And she never imagined that being brought back home would be marrying a greasy bald old man for her stepsister. Faced with the malicious schemes of top-notch family members, Shirchu expressed no fear because she had a secret: anything good to her brings good luck. If malicious, one will only reap the consequences and receive retribution. With their own lucky luck, they easily saved an old lady and even brought a billionaire CEO to come and ask for marriage. "Don't think too much, just take what you need," said the CEO with a cold expression. Xiaochu said, "Okay, for the sake of freedom, it's not impossible. From now on, the problems that little Koi cannot solve will be personally implemented by the CEO." Jing Heng buried himself in his neck, took a deep breath, and said deeply, "Wife, don't leave me, I love you." Keywords of the novel. Violent CEO's obedient pet, mute wife who is sweet and wild without pop-ups. Violent CEO's obedient pet, mute wife who is sweet and wild. Complete download of TXT, Violent CEO's obedient pet, mute wife who is sweet and wild. Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. Either you die or you die together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Either you die or you die together. In front of the dilapidated small room on the westernmost side of the orphanage, two figures, a man and a woman, pushed open the door and walked in. With a click, the door was locked. At that moment, he suddenly turned back and looked cautiously at the man behind him. Shenfeng gave an excited smile and said, "Xiaochu, no one here can disturb us anymore. I've liked you for a long time, let's be together." At first, he remained unmoved, furrowed his brows, and reached out to sign with a brief "no." She wanted to avoid Shenfeng and leave here, but he suddenly rushed forward and hugged her. Why refuse? From childhood to adulthood, in this orphanage, you only want to be close to me and never pay attention to others. I know you must also like me, right? At first, her expression suddenly became gloomy. She pushed Shenfeng away with force, took a step back, and looked at him coldly. He gestured with disgust, "Stay away from me. Xiaochu, you look so beautiful when you're angry, you must be mine." At the beginning, he was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, with almost no flaws in her face. Although she was mute, he had long coveted the girl in front of him. He was breathing rapidly, trying to approach. At first, it seemed as if sharp spines had risen all over his body. He quickly looked around and reached out to grab the vase on the table, smashing it hard towards Shenfeng's face. Shenfeng couldn't dodge and was hit on the forehead, suddenly making a painful cry. Before he could react, another old iron box broke through and hit him heavily. He dodged in embarrassment, his expression becoming increasingly fierce, and shouted, "Shirchu, stop struggling, it's useless. You're a mute who can't speak, no one will come here to save you. Just listen to me honestly, and you can suffer less." A wooden stool slammed against his side, and Shirchu's movement stopped. Shenfeng thought she had given up resisting, hissed and gasped for air, standing up proudly. This woman will belong to him today, it's not in vain for him to deliberately approach her for so many years. Pop. With a crisp sound, the white porcelain cup shattered into countless pieces on the ground. Shirchu grabbed a piece of broken porcelain and pressed it against his neck. Shenfeng suddenly changed his color and said, "Shirchu, are you crazy? Put it down quickly." Shirchu pursed his lips and remained unmoved. She stared coldly at Shenfeng, her eyes filled with determination and malice like a lone wolf. Shenfeng wanted to snatch the broken piece of porcelain, but as soon as he moved, Shirchu exerted force on his hand, causing a bloodline to be drawn on his neck. Blood flowed down his pale and slender neck. He had no doubt that as long as he dared to take another step forward, the woman in front of him would really dare to insert porcelain pieces into his neck. Damn it, he just wants to seize this woman and doesn't want to cause a lawsuit for human life. Shen Feng stood off against Shi Chu in a fit of rage for a moment, but in the end, he had no choice but to curse and curse at her, saying, "Crazy woman, today is my misfortune. I warn you not to speak out about what happened today, otherwise I will kill you." After speaking, he angrily opened the door and left in a fit of anger. At first, he watched cautiously as Shen Feng left in the direction until he was certain that he had really gone far, and then breathed a sigh of relief. Throwing away the broken porcelain pieces in his hand, he escaped from this room as quickly as possible. She hurriedly passed through the courtyard door and happened to bump into the serious dean walking in from outside the door. Behind the dean was a middle-aged man and woman. At first I knew that they might be the ones who came to adopt the child. This is already the third couple this month. The first two pairs were both scared away by her strange temper and cold and sharp eyes, even saying that she looked like an unfamiliar wolf. At first, there was no hope for this new couple. Perhaps she will never wait for someone willing to adopt her. She was about to dodge when Director Zhao, who was sharp-eyed, caught her. "Shi Chu. Don't run, come over quickly." She paused, turned her head, and confirmed that the dean was really waving at her before slowly walking over. Looking at the indifferent girl standing in front of him, Dean Zhao also felt a headache. Not every child in the orphanage has such good luck to be adopted by a happy family. At the beginning, this child was already 10 years old when she was sent to the orphanage. It was awkward to be half a year old, and coupled with her inability to speak, the key was her solitary and gloomy personality, which kept her in the orphanage until she was 20 years old. Fortunately, today this quirky girl was finally able to leave the orphanage. Dean Zhao lifted his spirits and patted Shi Chu's shoulder, saying with a smile, "Shi Chu, guess what good news I brought you." She leaned over, allowing Shi Chu to see the middle-aged couple behind her clearly. She exaggeratedly said, "These two gentlemen and wives are your family. They came specifically to pick you up today. At the beginning of the day, I was about to go home. Are you having a good time?" The man walked up to Chu and said with a loving expression, "Xiao Chu, I'm sorry, it's Dad who came late. Dad will take you home now." The middle-aged woman also wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. "Fortunately, we finally found Xiao Chu. We will definitely not let you suffer again in the future." Family members. At first, I looked at the man and my mother didn't tell her what my father's name was before she died. If the orphanage has already confirmed its authenticity, then her chance to leave here has finally arrived. The orphanage can only ensure their basic needs, and it is not a suitable place to live. The lack of response at the beginning made the atmosphere a bit awkward. Dean Zhao quickly said, "Mr. and Mrs. Shi, let's go handle the procedures now." Shi Russian smiled and nodded, saying, "Okay, please trouble Director Zhao. Our husband and wife can't wait to take Xiao Chu home." Wen Shilan wanted to reach out and embrace Shi Chu's shoulder, but was avoided. Her hand awkwardly stopped in mid-air and then withdrew as if nothing had happened. "Xiao Chu, this child is too shy. In the future, he will have more time to spend with his parents and cultivate relationships." Wen Shilan forced a smile and said. Mr. and Mrs. Shi Russian completed the procedures for Shi Chu as quickly as possible, and Dean Zhao also wished that there was one less mouth to eat in the courtyard. At the beginning, she remained silent throughout the entire process, but she was wary of the couple like a mountain in her heart. Is it really out of kindness that a father who hasn't appeared in 20 years and a stepmother suddenly want to adopt her back? After completing all the procedures, Shi Russian brought Shi Chu to the outside of the courtyard and urged her to get on the car. At first, there was no resistance and he lowered his head and got into the back seat. Suddenly, a staff member ran out of the hospital and anxiously shouted, "Dean, it's not good, Shen Feng just fell into the river." The car of the Shi family had already started, and when Shilan frowned and said, "The safety measures at the orphanage were too inadequate." Fortunately, Xiao Chu didn't have any accidents here. Shi Rushan also agreed and nodded, don't come to this place again in the future. At the beginning, one could see Dean Zhao and his group rushing back from the back window. When Shilan noticed her movements and comforted, does Xiao Chu know the person who fell into the water? Don't worry, he will be fine. At that moment, in a place that the two of them couldn't see, they slowly curled their lips and showed a cold smile. Shenfeng, the blame is on your own. Hello everyone. New book, please follow and collect it, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. This home is not suitable for long stay. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. This home is not suitable for long stay. The black sedan drove into the bustling city and gradually arrived at the quiet suburbs. This was a villa area where every inch of land was precious, and the villa of the Shi family was located here. Shi Chu shook his head and refused the driver's request to help carry his luggage. He silently followed behind Shi Rushan and his wife and walked into the magnificent house. When Shilan spoke gently, Xiao Chu, this will be your home from now on. Are you happy? Shi Chu gave her an indifferent glance without nodding. Home. It's just a house. When Shilan pinched her fingers and said with pity, you child, you have suffered in the orphanage. She was about to reach out and touch Shi Chu's face. At first, take a step back and frown slightly. When Shilan gave an uncomfortable dry laugh. The ringing of Shi Rushan's phone suddenly rang, and he quickly glanced at Shi Chu, met one Shilan's 4 eyes, nodded, and turned around to quickly walk outside. The expression on Shi Rushan's face made Shi Chu feel a momentary chill. She listened cautiously to the mountain-like conversation. Yes, Mr. Wang, don't worry, everything is arranged and we guarantee to satisfy you. Let's meet in a few days to discuss in detail. Shi Rushan's figure disappeared at the door, and Shi Chu gave Wen Shilan a thoughtful glance. Wen Shilan was uncomfortable with her sharp gaze, smiled awkwardly twice, and arranged for a servant to lead Shi Chu to the room prepared for her, while she hurriedly chased him out. What are these two suddenly appearing men and women up to? At first, she frowned, and the mysterious movements of Shi Rushan and Wen Shilan gave her an ominous feeling. It seemed that even if she left the orphanage, this home was not a place to stay for a long time. Find a suitable opportunity to leave the Shi family. At first, she placed her small suitcase in the corner of her bedroom, and even though she moved into the magnificent big house she had only seen on TV before, her expression remained unchanged, only indifferent as she examined the new environment. The Shi family villa is very large, with bedrooms on the second floor, Shi Rushan's study and gym on the third floor, and a large garden connected to the living room. At first, I walked around the garden twice and then stopped in the living room. When Shi Shanshan returned home, she saw a strange girl holding hands behind her back, staring intently at the hanging painting on the living room wall. Upon hearing the sound, the girl turned around and calmly glanced at her. Shi Shanshan sneered, do you know what that is? You've never seen so much money in your life for an antique painting that cost 4 million, have you? You're a bumpkin. Shi Chu looked at the newcomer with a gloomy and sharp gaze, which made Shi Shanshan feel like she was being targeted by a wild beast, and her throat became cold. Her disgust took it to the next level. What are you looking at? Do you, a mud-legged person who grew up in an orphanage, know how to draw? Don't think that if you come to my house, I will become a wealthy lady. I warn you, the only legitimate daughter of the Shi family is Shi Shanshan. I guessed her identity early on. The daughter of Shi Rushan and Wen Shilan, but she never expected that Shi Shanshan would have such a personality. She grew up in a greenhouse and didn't know how to hide her disgust. Compared to her parents, she was far behind. Shi Shanshan vented her anger, thinking she would see Shi Chu's expression of fear and hatred. However, she didn't expect the girl to just look at her indifferently, with a hint of mockery in her eyes. This made Shi Shanshan unbearable, as if she had become a comical circus monkey. Still not talking, uneducated thing, are you mute? Look at me again and I'll dig your eyes. Dead mute, get out of my house. She was angry and picked up the vase at hand, wanting to smash it at Shi Chu. Suddenly, Shi Shanshan's feet slipped inexplicably, accompanied by a scream of terror. Her back slammed heavily onto the floor, and the vase in her hand fell off and shattered into pieces. The flying debris cut through her arm. Shi Shanshan looked at the blood flowing from her arm, her face pale and extremely frightened. The servant who came upon hearing the sound was also shocked by the situation. While helping Shi Shanshan up, he immediately dialed the phone number of the driver from the Shi family. After a flurry, the driver drove Shi Shanshan to the hospital. At the beginning, the corners of Shi's lips curved slightly, and Shi Shanshan's self-indulgence allowed her to watch a good scene. She knew that Shi Rushan and Wen Shilan must have a different purpose when picking her up and hurting their precious daughter. Let's see if these two can still hold their composure. What? Shanshan is injured. Wen Shilan heard the servant's phone call and her face turned pale. She rushed to the hospital while instructing the driver to bring Shi Chu to the hospital. In the car, Wen Shilan's gentle and considerate mask hanging in front of Shi Chu disappeared without a trace, and she muttered to herself in a gloomy voice, "This broom star. If anything happens to Shanshan, I can't spare you." When she arrived at the VIP ward at the beginning, Shi Shanshan's wound had already been treated. Wen Shilan sat by the hospital bed, touching her face affectionately, while Shi Shanshan pouted, clearly complaining about something. Seeing Shi Chu appear, Shi Shanshan immediately gritted her teeth and pointed at her, saying, "Bitch, did you come to see me joke?" Wen Shilan glared at her daughter and said, "Shanshan, how could you say such things to your sister?" She looked at Shi Chu and pretended to be gentle, saying, "Xiao Chu, no matter what, you were wrong. I apologize to my sister and let's forget about today's matter." Apologizing is certainly not enough. Shi Shanshan glared fiercely at Shi Chu. "I have never suffered such a serious injury since I was young, and it's all because of this dead mute." She said maliciously, "The dead mute can't speak, how can you apologize? Why don't you kneel down and kowtow to me? I promise I won't pursue you again." Shi Chu gave her a cold and contemptuous look, then turned around and left. Shi Chu. Shi Shanshan was so angry that she grabbed the fruit tray on the table and threw it forcefully towards the door. "Mom, look at how arrogant this bumpkin is, he doesn't even take our mother and daughter seriously." Wen Shilan quickly patted her back and said, "Shanshan, you're injured. Don't get angry. Don't worry, she definitely won't threaten your position. The only daughter in the Shi family is you. She won't be arrogant for long at the beginning." At first, she felt impatient and annoyed by this mother-daughter. Staying in the hospital was a waste of time. She walked briskly along the clean white corridor of the hospital, and by the windowsill, an old woman with silver hair focused on looking out the window. Suddenly, she tilted her head and seemed to hear something. She frowned and turned around wanting to leave, just in time to collide with Shi Chu who had walked up to her. The old lady let out a "yeah," and fell to the ground. A pair of slender and soft hands reached out before her eyes. The old lady supported Shi Chu's hand and stood up. Instead of blaming Shi Chu, she looked at her kindly and said with a smile, "I'm getting old and my eyes are not good. Little girl, I'm really sorry." The old woman with silver hair on her head had a gentle and loving expression, carrying a soothing and serene scholarly aura. At first, there was no sense of vigilance towards the elderly or children, and the cold eyebrows and eyes became gentle, showing an unfamiliar smile towards the old lady. The old lady has an outgoing and talkative personality, holding Shi Chu's hand and talking enthusiastically, complaining about the boredom of the hospital and not even having anyone to chat with. At first, he listened attentively without any impatience. It wasn't until the nurse's loud call came from not far away that the old lady sighed and said, "It's only been a while since I came out, and someone has come looking for me again. This hospitalization is like going to jail. Little girl, I won't waste your time. Goodbye. At first, I didn't know how to show my kindness, so I had to smile at the old woman again and leave the hospital with light steps. The old lady witnessed her figure disappear into the elevator, and behind her came the nurse's worried reminder. I said, "Old lady, can't you just stay in the hospital room obediently?" End of this chapter. Chapter 3, I haven't taught you how to pick things up casually. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3, I haven't taught you how to pick things up casually. Although Shi Shanshan's personality was arrogant and unreasonable, which made Shi Chu very annoyed, the kind old lady she met in the hospital also made her mood much better. In addition, in the following days, when Shirlan stayed at the hospital with Shi Shanshan, while Shi Rushan was busy with work, leaving her alone in the villa. At the beginning of the day, a few clean days passed and I felt very comfortable. Xiao Chu. Shi Chu was taking a walk in the garden when he hurriedly walked over with a mountain-like expression and eagerly asked, "Did you bump into an old lady in the hospital a few days ago?" Shi Chu frowned slightly, not understanding how Shi Rushan knew about this, but still nodded and admitted. Shi Rushan was overjoyed in an instant, and his eyes were shining as he looked at Shi Chu. Okay. He excitedly turned in place twice, not knowing what he was thinking, then took out his phone and quickly took a photo of Shi Chu, bowing his head and nodding the phone screen. This strange behavior did not attract Shi Chu's attention. In fact, she didn't care what Shi Rushan was doing at all. She just thought about when he could leave and let herself continue to stay quietly. Shi Rushan hurriedly came and left, but Shi Chu was indifferent to it. However, in the evening, the villa, which had been quiet for a few days, suddenly became lively, with a large number of gifts flowing in like water, piled up in the living room like a small hill, standing on the side like a mountain, laughing uncontrollably. When Shirlan politely bid farewell to the person who had come to the door and stood by Shi Rushan's side, whispering, "Rushan, is this something inappropriate?" Shi Rushan interrupted her, "The opportunity is rare." Shi Chu took a glance as he passed by and was about to leave when he was stopped by Shi Rushan. The man looked at her with a smile and said, "Xiao Chu, you are really the lucky star of our family back then." At first, he looked at him with confusion and uncertainty. Shi Rushan looked at her and exclaimed, "Xiao Chu, you are really lucky. Do you know that the old lady you met in the hospital a few days ago is the old lady of the Nian family? The old lady has set her sights on you. Nian Shi is going to marry our Shi family. These gifts were all sent by the president of Nian Shi. Xiao Chu, are you happy?" At that moment, his face suddenly turned cold as ice, and he shook his head heavily. Shi Rushan's smile receded and his face turned cold. At that time, you may not even know what the identity of the president of the Nian group is. Marrying him is definitely something that our family is striving for. Shi Chu took the handwritten tablet that he couldn't leave and forcefully wrote a line of words. "I refuse." When Shirlan was already impatient and no longer willing to maintain a gentle mask. With a sneer, she sarcastically said, "Refuse. I don't know what kind of identity the Nian family is. I'm not satisfied with climbing such a wealthy family." Shi Chu gave her a fierce glare and wrote on the handwriting board, "If you want to marry, marry yourself. Don't try to influence me." She ran upstairs, grabbed her luggage, and wanted to leave. Shi Rushan and Wen Shirlan are simply insane. The sound of locking came from the door, and no matter how hard Shi Chu tried, he couldn't open it. A cold voice like a mountain came from outside the door. "Think carefully in your room, there's nothing wrong with listening to Dad. You don't need to come out until you think it through." He instructed the servant, "Watch the door carefully. If something goes wrong, you will feel better." At first, a towering anger surged in her indifferent eyes, and Shi Rushan dared to imprison her. Trying to make her submit like this, Shi Rushan couldn't help but underestimate her. At that moment, she pushed open the bedroom window and quickly jumped onto the windowsill. The height of the second floor was not considered dangerous. She looked around and saw that no one had noticed. She jumped up and down, rolled around on the ground, unloaded the weight of the floor, and jumped into the garden. The sky was thunderous, and in an instant, it rained heavily. Following the cover of the rain curtain, Chu climbed over the railing of the garden and dared not stop, running outwards. She ran along the secluded and wide road in the suburbs towards the city center, and as the rain grew heavier, it hit her head and face. Chu wiped away the rain on her chin, making her vision blurry. She gritted her teeth and thought to herself, we can't continue running. Such heavy rain is likely to cause a high fever, and she doesn't have the right to get sick now. If she were caught by Russian, it would be over. After running another distance, Chu's eyes lit up and she opened the door of the roadside telephone booth and crawled in. It was pouring rain outside the glass pavilion, and this small space became her temporary shelter. She breathed a sigh of relief at first. Bang! The man with yellow hair turned red all over his face, holding a bottle of beer in his hand, and stumbled into the phone booth in a daze. He turned his head and saw Chu in the phone booth. His eyes lit up and he swallowed saliva, drooling. Little beauty, why are you hiding here alone? How about coming out to accompany your brother? He quickly opened the door and grabbed Chu's arm, trying to pull her out. Chu gritted his teeth and struggled while holding onto the door frame with one hand, refusing to let go. The thug became impatient, with a fierce light in his eyes. You're quite stubborn, little slut. Get out of here. At the beginning, her head slammed against the glass door, and after several consecutive impacts, she began to feel dizzy and her hands gradually lost strength. However, she persisted and stared fiercely at the thug in front of her, wishing to bite through his throat. A black Bentley drove by the roadside and slowly stopped. The man in the back seat, with his eyes closed and focused, opened his eyes. His handsome features were like the most perfect creation of God, with no flaws to be found. However, under his cold and domineering aura, no one dared to look directly at that flawless face. No one dares to tease him about his appearance. This man is a tyrant. Jing Heng turned his head to the side, his eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Take care of the people who are obstructing your eyes. He spat out cold words. The thug was dragged into the alley by a tall bodyguard, and there were mournful cries for mercy. As he fell into a coma, Chu was taken to the car. Have I taught you how to pick up anything and come back? Jing Heng's sharp gaze swept over his subordinates, and the tall men couldn't help but tremble, about to grab the unconscious Chu and throw him back into the phone booth. Stop. At that moment, his face happened to face Jing Heng. Looking at the face he had only seen in the photo a few days ago, Jing Heng's gaze narrowed slightly. Go to the hospital. Chu slowly opened his eyes in the pungent smell of disinfectant, and the man's indifferent voice rang in his ear. Wake up. She sat up from the hospital bed and looked at the man beside the bed. Her tall figure made the man look down at her, and her robust figure was full of explosive power like a leopard, making Chu instinctively feel dangerous. Before falling into a coma, Chu felt that someone had saved him. At this moment, he gestured in sign language to the lifesaver, saying, "Thank you." Seeing her sign language, Jing Heng's eyes twitched slightly, but he didn't show any unusual expression. He said calmly, "A slight concussion and a low fever. If I hadn't picked you up, do you know what I would have ended up with?" The man's words carried a hint of sarcasm, but what he said was the truth. Chu pursed his lips and nodded. She looked at the man in front of her with a hint of curiosity, unsure if she should ask the man's identity. The man seemed to see her thoughts and spoke calmly, "I am Jing Heng." Jing Heng. Is it like the president of the Nyen family in Yamaguchi? At the beginning of hearing this name, his expression suddenly changed, and he felt a chill all over his body. He looked at the man with a fierce gaze, and his muscles tightened all over his body. In Jing Heng's eyes, he looked like a small hedgehog suddenly prickling its entire body. At first, I couldn't help but wonder if this man had been following me from the beginning. Jing Heng sneered, "Finally, I haven't burned it into a fool. I still know the name of your future husband." Upon hearing this, Shi Chu didn't want to stay any longer and immediately stood up to leave. "After being soaked in the rain, my weak body couldn't support the weight of my whole body. At first, I got up suddenly, and my eyes turned black. I rushed forward. A pair of strong and cold hands firmly caught her." Shi Chu pushed away Jing Heng, took 2 steps back, pursed his lips, and stared at him intently. Jing Heng didn't pay attention to her reaction and arrogantly said, "Why, this is the attitude towards life. Saving benefactors." He looked down at Shi Chu and suddenly became interested. "We can make a deal." At first, he didn't relax his guard, but shook his head. "She can't believe this man." Jing Heng firmly grasped Shi Chu's chin and said coldly, "You need to understand who the lonely and helpless person is. Don't you want freedom?" Shi Chu's eyes darkened, he waved away his hand, sat on the bed, and continued to stare at Jing Heng. The man said, "If you agree to this marriage, it can be considered as helping me solve a small problem. As a reward, I will protect you in the future. At the same time, I will also invite the world's top medical experts to treat your mute disease. When the time comes, our marriage will be invalidated, and I will set you free." Despite his sincere words, he still refused to let his guard down at the beginning. Marriage is not a joke. She was about to shake her head to refuse when the door to the ward was suddenly knocked on, and a mountain-like voice rang out. "Shi Chu. Are you inside?" Jing Heng was about to open the door when he turned around and suddenly grabbed his wrist with force. He lowered his head and met a pair of eyes filled with determination. Shi Chu looked into Jing Heng's eyes and nodded heavily. She agreed to this transaction. Collaborate with the man in front of you and completely escape from the Shi family. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. My lady, Jing Heng, cannot be bullied by anyone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. My lady, Jing Heng, cannot be bullied by anyone. The ward door opened inwardly, and Shi Russian angrily walked in. He saw Shi Chu sitting on the bed and pointed at her, cursing loudly, "How dare the little rabbit run? Look at me not breaking your legs. Damn it." Mr. Shi's eyes seemed to require treatment. Jing Heng interrupted his incessant curses with a loud voice. Shi Russian saw the man standing by the door, like a chicken with its neck pinched, and his face turned red. Nian Zong, why are you here?" He broke out in cold sweat on his forehead and walked towards Shi Chu with a dry smile, whispering, "Xiao Chu, it's raining outside. You suddenly left without saying goodbye, and both parents are very worried." His arrogant aura disappeared just now, and he spoke softly to Shi Chu. "Are you injured? Let's go home with Dad." He walked to the hospital bed, blocking the view from the door, gritting his teeth and tightly gripping Shi Chu's arm, his eyes showing a threatening light. Feeling pain at first, she frowned and coldly looked up at Shi Russian. Jing Heng saw that her expression was different, so he lifted his foot and walked over. Without a doubt, he pushed away Shi Russian and stood between him and Shi Chu. "Mr. Nian, I've caused trouble for you. I'll take Xiao Chu home now," Shi Russian said with a smile. Jing Heng said arrogantly, "Miss Shi's affairs won't bother you anymore. Mr. Shi's top priority is to go back and prepare for the wedding well. The marriage alliance between the two families is not a small matter." Shi Chu listened expressionlessly. Seeing that she did not show any strong opposition again, Shi Russian felt relieved and extremely excited. He nodded repeatedly and said, yes, I will go back and prepare well. I will definitely not lose face with the New Year family. I promise to let Xiao Chufeng get married in glory. Being able to marry Mr. Nian is an honor for Xiao Chu. She will definitely be obedient in the future, and will never make Mr. Nian angry. Shi Russian flattered a few words, but seeing that Jing Heng did not respond or have any objections, he hurriedly left the hospital and hurried back to prepare for the wedding. Jing Heng's face turned pale at first, and he called for a doctor to perform a full-body examination for her. "If you don't want to go back, just stay here temporarily. I can guarantee that no one will disturb you," Jing Heng said. At first, her tense expression slightly eased, and she felt the man's kindness, hoping that this transaction was not a wrong decision. She shook her head and glanced sideways at the pitch-black window. After confirming that Shi Chu had no major health issues, Jing Heng personally sent her back to the Shi family villa. Black Bentley stopped outside the villa, and Jing Heng glanced at the quiet and silent Shi Chu. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke up, "This is my contact information, please remember. Feel free to contact me if you have anything. My wife, Jing Heng, cannot be bullied by anyone. Since he has decided to cooperate, he doesn't mind giving his partners some help to the best of his ability. Thank you." A hoarse and soft voice sounded inside the car, as if it had not been spoken for a long time, with a hint of bitterness. Jing Heng showed a surprised expression for the first time. "How can you speak?" Shi Chu nodded calmly. Jing Heng became curious about the girl who was about to become his wife for the first time. What is the reason why everyone thinks she's a mute who can't speak? However, Jing Heng didn't ask, he had both patience and time. He has a premonition that the days ahead will become interesting. Shi Chu bid farewell to Jing Heng and pushed open the door of the Shi family villa. Shi Shanshan was sitting on the sofa with a restless expression on her face. She saw Shi Chu quietly enter the door, about to go upstairs without saying a word, and suddenly bounced off the sofa. "Shi Chu! Stop me!" She quickly walked over and grabbed Shi Chu's wrist, eagerly saying, "Hey, I know you don't want to marry into the Nian family. I'm willing to marry Jing Heng for you." At first, I was too lazy to waste time on her, so I waved away Shi Shanshan's hand to go back to my room to rest. Seeing that Shi Chu dared not pay attention to her, Shi Shanshan was furious and said, "Talking to you is to save face, bitch." She raised her hand to give Shi Chu a slap in the face, but Shi Chu had already keenly turned around. As she raised her hand, she forcefully pushed her, causing Shi Shanshan to stumble twice and almost fall again. She screamed incredulously, "At that moment, how dare you take action against me? You don't want to live anymore." Shi Shanshan rushed forward and grabbed Shi Chu's arm tightly with both hands, blocking her footsteps. "There's nothing self-awareness, do you still want to climb the high branch of last year's house? Jing Heng wouldn't be interested in a mute like you. Only I deserve him." "Oh, idiot." At first, he opened his mouth and sneered sarcastically. Shi Shanshan widened her eyes in surprise and said, "You, how can you speak?" At first, he looked at her contemptuously, doubting whether her intelligence was problematic. "My family knows my appearance, do you still want to marry me? Pig brain." Shi Chu was impatient to hear Shi Shanshan's piercing voice again. She remained calm and turned sideways, suddenly kicking her foot towards Shi Shanshan's abdomen. Shi Shanshan couldn't dodge and fell heavily to the ground, making a mournful cry. Shi Chu snorted coldly. "With this combat power, do you still want to give her some color?" She turned her head and was about to go upstairs when her ankles were grabbed by both hands. At first, impatiently kicked the person lying on the ground away. Shi Shanshan screamed in pain and stumbled up from the ground, looking disheveled. "Shi Chu! You bitch, don't be so proud. Without the Shi family, you're nothing at all. Dad has already kicked both of you mother and daughter out of the house, you bereaved star. Little bastard without a mother, I won't let you go. Do you think that after marrying into the Nian family, you will fly up to the branches and become a phoenix? How dare you be arrogant and dream in front of me?" Shi Shanshan cursed loudly, with no etiquette at all, like a shrew. Shi Chu turned his head and looked at Shi Shanshan with a gloomy expression. After a while, he suddenly sneered and took 2 steps back. "Do you still want to run? Stop me. Shi Shanshan reached out in the direction of Shi Chu, and suddenly, a few strange noises came from above. Just as Shi Shanshan was about to look up, the huge chandelier in the living room came down straight towards her with a whistling sound. Shi Shanshan stepped back in time, and the chandelier exploded at her feet, covering the ground with debris. She was stunned for 2 seconds before realizing what had just happened and screaming in terror. Ah! Shanshan! What's wrong? As soon as when Shirlan entered the door, she heard her daughter shouting and quickly ran over. She was shocked to see the chandelier on the ground and comforted Shanshan softly when she hugged her. At first, I saw the mother and daughter huddled together, feeling bored. I looked regretfully at the chandelier on the ground and turned back to the second-floor bedroom. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Let them commit their own sins and cannot live. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Let them commit their own sins and cannot live. Late at night, Shi Chu quietly opened his eyes in the darkness. She pushed open the door and prepared to go downstairs, but when she turned her head, she saw that there was a crack in Shanshan's room, revealing light. At the beginning, there was a pause in her footsteps, like a nimble cat, making no sound, and she walked to the door of Shi Shanshan's room. Mom, this little bastard didn't take me seriously at that time. You must take it out on my behalf. Shi Shanshan said wrongly. When Shirlan said with resentment, your father didn't even care about this little bastard. If it weren't for Wang Yi's intention to marry our Shi family, and we couldn't bear to marry you to that old man, how could he go to great lengths to bring Shi Chu back home? Shi Chu's gaze fixed outside the door, and suddenly remembered the phone call that Shi Russian received on the day he first arrived at home. Isn't the caller ID displayed as Mr. Wang? So, she finally knew the reason why Shi Russian and his wife had to take her back to the Shi family. After hearing this, Shi Shanshan pounded the bed hard and said angrily, what if we agreed to let her marry Wang Yi? Why has it become a marriage alliance with the Nian family now? How could that bumpkin match last year's Jing Heng? When Shirlan sighed and said, who knows how she caught the eye of the Nian family. Wang Yi is not even worthy of lifting shoes for the Nian family. Of course, your father will agree to the Nian family's proposal. Shi Shanshan said resentfully, Dad still doesn't allow us to talk about Wang Yi. He's determined to use his time to cling to the Nian family. Mom, I can't swallow this breath. Do you really want to watch that little bastard transform into the young lady of the Nian family? Isn't she going to trample on us mother and daughter under our feet? When Shirlan held Shi Shanshan's hand and said firmly, of course we can't give her a discount. Do you want to fly up to the branch and become a phoenix? Dream. Only we Shanshan deserve a man as excellent as Jing Heng last year. Listen carefully. At that moment, he silently listened to the malicious conversation between the mother and daughter, with a glint in his eyes. After a while, she curled her lips and sneered silently, then quietly returned to her room as if nothing had happened. The next morning, when Shirlan knocked on Shi Chu's door. Your wedding is approaching, your father asked me to take you to pick the wedding dress that suits your heart, pack it up, and prepare to go out, she said arrogantly. Shi Chu nodded in agreement, but the car drove straight to the hotel. Shi Chu took out his handwriting pad and asked, why are you here? When Shirlan impatiently said, as a family like us, of course all the wedding dresses we want to see are custom-made. Don't look like you haven't seen the world before. At first, he didn't say anything and silently followed Wen Shirlan into the hotel room. Rows of wedding dresses were displayed in front of him, set with expensive diamonds, all handmade, making him dizzy and mesmerizing. At the beginning, I carefully selected in front of the shelf. Although it was not a union with someone I loved, marriage was still a big deal. She chose her favorite white strapless wedding dress and stood in front of the mirror, carefully examining the unfamiliar person in the mirror. I'm tired sitting on the small sofa to rest, when Shirlan gave a cold groan and asked someone to bring dim sum and juice, and casually pushed Shi Chu a cup. Drink it, it's useless. At the beginning, I held my forehead with one hand and suddenly looked in surprise towards the direction of the hangar. Wen Shirlan turned back suspiciously and said, "What's wrong?" As she turned her head, Shichu's hand quickly moved the cup in front of her and Wen Shirlan's to a different position. Wen Shirlan didn't notice anything unusual. She frowned and turned her head, saying in a harsh tone, "It was a surprise." It was indeed from the countryside. At first, I lowered my eyes and picked up a cup to take a sip of the juice. Wen Shirlan couldn't help but show a happy expression, casually picking up the cup and drinking the juice in front of her. After a while, Shichu suddenly let go and the cup fell onto the carpet. She shook her body twice and was about to lie down on the table. Wen Shirlan helped Shichu and whispered, "Are you tired? I'll help you sleep in bed." She helped Shichu walk to the bedside and suddenly felt a whirlwind, blurring the scenery in front of her. What's going on? A huge doubt arose in Wen Shirlan's heart, but she had no time to think. Her eyes darkened and she fell onto the bed. Just now when I was asleep, Shichu suddenly opened his eyes and his eyes were clear and bright. She took out her phone from Wen Shirlan's bag, used her fingerprint to unlock it, flipped through Shan Shan's contact information, and sent a message. Shan Shan, there is a change in the plan. You come to room XX of the Imperial Hotel immediately. 10 minutes later, Shan Shan hurriedly arrived at the hotel and pushed open the door. Mom! What happened? Before she could finish speaking, Shichu, who was hiding behind the door, lifted a vase and smashed it onto her neck. Shan Shan fainted on the ground. Hiding in the floor-to-ceiling wardrobe by the door, I opened the wardrobe slightly. 20 minutes later, the hotel door was pushed open and a middle-aged man with a big belly walked in. Seeing the two women lying on the bed, Wang Yi didn't think much and smirked, taking off his clothes and pouncing on them. Shichu held up his phone and recorded a video for 10 minutes. Taking advantage of the people in bed not paying attention to the movements around him, he slipped out of the room with a crack in the door. At the beginning, he strode forward and suddenly stopped at the corner. In front of him, Jing Heng was looking at her in surprise, with a hint of amazement in his eyes. The girl was wearing a pure white wedding dress, exquisite and elegant, pure and flawless, like an elf walking out of the forest. "How could you be here?" he asked. Shichu turned around and glanced at the room not far away, frowned slightly, grabbed Jing Heng's hand and walked forward quickly. Annual total. The hotel manager ran over with sweat on his forehead and said, "Suddenly, a large number of reporters are coming into the hotel outside the door. Is something wrong?" Jing Heng pondered for a moment. Just as he was about to ask someone to drive the reporters out, he suddenly felt his clothes being pulled by someone. He changed his voice and said, "No problem, let them in." The manager was ordered to step down, and Jing Heng curiously glanced at Shichu. "What arrangements do you have?" Shichu pursed his lips without answering, pulling Jing Heng to stand in the shadow at the corner, looking sideways at the corridor where he had come. In just a few minutes, a dozen or so reporters rushed up like wolves seeing meat, straight into the room where they had just run out, and frantically patted the three people in bed. A few more minutes later, Russian ran in with a disheveled expression. Before long, his angry roar echoed throughout the corridor. "Get lost! Don't take any more photos." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. When not disturbing, always teach wives and daughters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. When not disturbing, always teach wives and daughters. The roaring of Russian did not stop the reporter. "Isn't this the president of Group?" The two women lying in bed seemed to be his wife and children. "Oh my goodness, I didn't expect a wealthy family to play so thrillingly. Quick shoot, such explosive news will definitely make it a hot search on the entire internet." Russian's face turned red with anger, and he rushed up to grab the camera, slamming it to the ground and wrestling with a few people. "I told you not to take photos. The scene was once chaotic. Stop it. A low and indifferent voice sounded, like pressing a pause button, and the room suddenly stopped tearing. Several pairs of eyes looked at the door in unison. Jing Heng walked in slowly, followed by the hotel manager and a large number of security guards. Year total. Sure, Russian panicked. How could Jing Heng be here? General manager, are you here for anything? Can you wait for me to handle the family matters first before? I'm not here to find you. Jing Heng impatiently interrupted his words and turned his indifferent eyes to a group of reporters. He coldly opened his lips and said, "Don't leave yet. Do you want me to invite you to leave?" The reporters saw that Jing Heng had spoken, so they didn't have the courage to linger. They quickly put away their cameras and ran away without stopping. Wang Yi, who had been timid and hiding at the corner of the bed, quickly put on his pants while the crowd was chaotic, and ran along with the reporters in the group. Sure, Russian adjusted his clothes in a disheveled manner and said, "Thank you, Mr. Nyen. If you hadn't appeared in time to drive them away, it might have caused a big disaster." With the help of Jing Heng, Sure Russian became even more determined to help Sure Chu successfully marry the family of last year and climb the golden mountain of the family of last year. Jing Heng only glanced faintly at Sure Russian, who was very attentive, and sneered, "I'm just afraid they might affect the hotel business here." After speaking, his gaze turned to the two women on the big bed with pale faces, and his lips were even more sarcastic. "I won't disturb Madame Sure and Miss Sure here," he said. Sure Russian's face turned white and he roared at the two women on the bed, "Two embarrassing things, what are you doing? Hurry up and get down." When Shirlan and Sure Shanshan's clothes had already been torn apart, and the mother and daughter, who were not fully clothed, could only pull on the bedding to cover themselves. Despite this, it cannot conceal the ambiguous traces on their bodies. Seeing that she had not made a big mistake, when Shirlan felt palpitations and immediately thought of the beginning. Like a mountain. When Shirlan tearfully complained to Sure Russian, "It's all because of that slut from Sure Chu. She dared to put medicine in my cup and even tricked Shan Shan into coming to the hotel. What kind of kindness do you think she is?" Sure Russian was about to speak when a low voice interrupted him. "Oh. You mean, I framed you at the beginning?" Jing Heng, who was walking towards the door, suddenly turned back. The three people in the room were all surprised. Sure Shanshan saw that Jing Heng had gone and returned, her eyes twitched, and she thought to herself that an opportunity had come. She stumbled towards Jing Heng before when Shirlan could speak, and then accidentally fell over. Jing Heng gave a faint glance, took a step, and calmly dodged. Sure Shanshan stumbled a few steps and fell to the ground. "Mr. Nyen, don't be fooled by Sure Chu's disguised appearance. She often bullies me at home. Look at the injuries on my body, they were all beaten by her." Sure Shanshan thought her delicate appearance would make Jing Heng feel sorry and would help her up. Unexpectedly, Jing Heng had a hint of coldness all over his body, and he looked down at her from a high position. "People are stupid, so don't blame being bullied," he said. "What are you saying?" When Shanshan was pampered from a young age, she had never been humiliated like this before and couldn't help but cry. With a crying and wailing expression, Jing Heng felt annoyed as he watched. "Get lost. All right, Shanshan, look at what you look like, get up quickly." Sure Russian didn't even know how to scold his daughter for being foolish. Sure Shanshan saw that Jing Heng didn't believe her words at all, so she had to beg Sure Russian, "Dad, you must make the decision for us and not let Sure Chu go. You said it was done by Xiao Chu, do you have any evidence?" "Dad, we're all like this now. Don't you believe it? Mr. Wang, you were supposed to give Sure Chu back then." When Shirlan glared at Sure Shanshan, asked her to shut up, and then added, "When I asked you not to adopt her back, you insisted on bringing her home. She's just an immature white-eyed wolf. We serve her well and bring her to choose a wedding dress. She's lucky. She's jealous that Shanshan is a Miss Sure, afraid that she might snatch her position as the young lady." She even designed me and Shanshan, and called a group of reporters to expose us. She's not ambitious, she wants to kill everyone. Wen Shilan wanted to say something more when a light footstep sounded at the door. She looked up and saw the girl walking in, her pupils tightened in shock. At first, you still have face. Shi Shanshan roared, her crimson eyes wishing to eat her raw. Shi Chu looked calmly at the crazy Shi Shanshan and said, "You mother and daughter have suffered the consequences." This mother and daughter villain first filed a complaint. Shi Chu heard it outside just now, and she came out, just not wanting them to splash dirty water on her body. "Mom, look, she's pretending to be mute again. She can clearly speak." Wen Shilan was also shocked, and her daughter mentioned that Shi Chu could speak, so she secretly observed when she came to the hotel to deceive Shi Chu, but did not find anything wrong. She was convinced that it might be better to probe at this time. "At the beginning, were we not good enough to you? Why did you harm us? How could your heart be so cruel?" Jing Heng raised his eyebrows slightly and saw Shi Chu standing in the corner without saying a word. Curious, Shi Chu's thin lips curled. He said to Shi Russian in a secluded voice, "A woman who marries into the Nian family must have good character. If Shi Chu is really so miserable, this marriage, I'm afraid we'll have to withdraw." Upon hearing that Jing Heng was about to withdraw from his marriage, Shi Russian was like a cat stepping on its tail, with hair all over his body standing up. "Mr. Nian, don't misunderstand. Xiao Chu is not a child with bad behavior. She usually doesn't even dare to step on an ant. How could she deceive or harm others?" Wen Shilan was still saying that Shi Chu had harmed her when Shi Russian slapped her in the face. "You shut up. Xiao Chu is kind-hearted, how dare you say she harmed you? You shameless woman, you have been infatuated with such vulgar behavior and slandered Xiao Chu. Have your heart been eaten by the dog, so wicked? And you too." Shi Russian angrily pointed at Shi Shanshan and said, "You shameless thing, get out of my house immediately, don't embarrass me outside." Wen Shilan covered her painful face and both Shi Shanshan were confused. "Mr. Nian, don't worry, I will investigate the matter thoroughly and keep you innocent." Shi Russian turned his head and smiled pleasantly at Jing Heng, afraid that he would be unhappy and regret his marriage. "Please believe that Xiao Chu is a good child," he said. Jing Heng lifted his chin with satisfaction, his gaze fixed on Shi Chu, and a smile on his lips that he didn't even notice. I believe it," he said, "I always teach my wife to have children when I'm not disturbed." He strode over and pulled Shi Chu in front of him, saying, "She's tired, I'll take her away first." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. What are you still here for? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. What are you still here for? Without seeking Shi Chu's consent, he grabbed her wrist and led her out of the room. In the hallway, Shi Chu turned his wrist and tried to pull his hand out, but it didn't twitch. Shi Chu stopped and brought the man ahead to a stop. "Not leaving." Jing Heng looked at Shi Chu, who was unwilling to leave, and said, "What are you still doing here?" Shi Chu lowered his head and looked at the hand he was holding. "Let go." Jing Heng glanced at her slightly flushed cheeks and raised an eyebrow. "Shu, I'm sorry about that." Suddenly teasing her, Jing Heng withdrew his long arm and was suddenly pulled into his arms by him. "What are you doing?" Shi Chu was so surprised that he blurted out. Jing Heng curled his lips, imprisoning the petite person in front of him. He lowered his head and pressed it against her ear, his voice hoarse and deep, and hot air sprayed all over her ear. "Practice ahead, you'll need it many times in the future, don't you think, Mrs. Nian?" "Mrs. Nian." Shi Chu stared at him with a pair of wet eyes and anger. "Please take care of yourself, Nian. Do you want to go back on your word?" Jing Heng lifted her chin, her black eyes as deep as an abyss, carrying a sense of oppression. At the beginning, he met his secretive gaze and swallowed the words on his lips. Thinking of just being in the room, he stood up for her, knowing that she had tampered with her but not betrayed her, as if fulfilling his promise to protect her. No. At the beginning, I lowered my eyes and stood quietly in the arms of Jing Heng. The obedient attitude at the beginning satisfied Jing Heng very much. He hugged her and strode into the elevator. The air around him was filled with breath that belonged to him, and at first he felt inexplicably dry and tongue-twitching. She lifted her head and stared at Jing Heng's handsome and perfect profile, wondering if it was due to the lighting. She felt particularly beautiful, as if in a dream, and her vision blurred. Her body was getting hotter and hotter, and her footsteps were gradually floating. She was afraid of falling and reached out to embrace the man's waist. Jing Heng stiffened all over, and the next second, a soft body pressed against him. He lowered his head and saw the restless little woman picking at his clothes. At the beginning, did you know what you were doing? At the beginning, a bad feeling suddenly arose in my heart, and my consciousness gradually became confused. It's so hot. Although her voice was very hoarse, there was a hint of softness in her tone, and her eyes and movements were very abnormal. The elevator has arrived. Jing Heng picked it up and strode out of the elevator. At the beginning, the little hand tightly grasped the man's collar, with a hint of pleading in its obscure voice, "Help me. Don't worry." Jing Heng probably guessed what was going on with her and quickly carried her to the parking lot. The driver pulled open the car door, and Jing Heng put her in the car, commanding in a low voice, "Go to the hospital." When she arrived at the hospital, the doctor conducted a blood test on Chu and quickly found that her blood contained a certain special drug. At first, she fell asleep for a long time, and by the time she woke up, it was already dark. A tall and upright figure stood by the window, almost blending in with the night outside. She wanted to sit up and make some delicate rustling sounds, and the man heard the sound and turned around. "You're awake." At first, subconsciously looking around and seeing that it was a hospital, my heart immediately calmed down and said, "Thank you." The man looked at her calmly and said, "Are you sober now?" Before, she was like a little lion seeking dissatisfaction. Chu nodded, his cold little face appearing awkward. Although this man looked cold and indifferent, in that situation, he did not touch her or leave her in the hospital. Chu looked at Jing Heng, his black eyes clean and clear. "I have to go now," he said. Seeing that he didn't say anything, she got out of bed and bent down to put on her shoes. Jing Heng lazily leaned against the windowsill, his pitch-black eyes fixed on her until she put on her shoes before he opened his lips and said, "I'll give you a gift." At first, she wanted to refuse, but Jing Heng had already passed her and took his coat and walked out. In the car, it was clear from the beginning that Sherlon had poured 2 cups of juice in order to prevent accidents, which was a fatal blow to her. Maybach slowly stopped at the entrance of Sher's house. After a moment's pause, she looked at Jing Heng and said, "Is my test report still there?" After asking, she felt like asking for nothing. How could he keep something meaningless to him? "I'm afraid she'll have to go to the hospital to get it." "Forget it if you don't have it." Unexpectedly, the man gave her a faint glance and took out a white, neatly folded paper from his coat pocket. At first, looking at the report in his hand, a small surprise flashed through his heart. She reached out to get it, but Jing Heng didn't give it. "Give me your phone," she said. At first, he was puzzled what he wanted his phone to do, but still obediently took out his phone. "Unlock," Jing Heng calmly ordered. At first, I became even more puzzled and opened the screen lock. Jing Heng snatched the phone directly from her hand, his knuckled fingers swiped a few times on the phone screen, and whispered, "This is my personal number. You can call me anytime if you have any trouble." Jing Heng returned her phone and report form, without asking her what to do with the report form. This action made Chu, who had never felt kindness before, feel a hint of warmth in his heart. "Thank you." Jing Heng didn't care at all. "I owe it for now, and I'll pay it back together next time." Chu nodded and opened the car door to get off. As soon as she got off the car, she saw Sir Russian standing at the entrance waiting for her. Nian Zong, Xiao Chu. Shi Chu frowned in annoyance, wondering why he was here. Shi Chu wanted to enter the house, but Sir Russian blocked her and said, Xiao Chu, Mr. Nian sent you back. Why don't you invite Mr. Nian to come in and sit down quickly? At that moment, when I turned around, I saw Jing Heng's car window come down and he was sitting inside, lighting a cigarette and casually smoking. She pursed her lips, not knowing what he meant. Seeing Shi Chu standing still for half a day, Sir Russian became a bit anxious. Dragging Shi Chu, his face still looked like a loving father, but his hand strength was increasing. Xiao Chu, can't you be so impolite? Why don't you go quickly? Shi Chu was extremely disgusted by Sir Russian's attempt to curry favor with Jing Heng. He shook off Sir Russian's hand and gestured expressionlessly, if you want to go, it's none of my business. After speaking, she bypassed Sir Russian and quickly entered the villa. Sir Russian glared fiercely at Shi Chu's back, turned around and immediately changed into a wrinkled smile at Jing Heng, and quickly walked forward to flatter. Mr. Nian, Xiao Chu is quite stubborn and doesn't understand how to handle things. Please forgive me. I apologize for her and I will definitely educate her well in the future. Jing Heng exhaled a thin smoke and said, it's okay, no matter what she does, she will be a legitimate Nian wife in the future. This sentence is somewhat thought-provoking. But it's the other two who give me a bit of a headache. After the light smoke and mist, Jing Heng's expression appeared unreal. Just say what you have to say. Sir Russian didn't know that Jing Heng had something to say. At that time, she will marry into the Nian family in the future. Whoever bullies her will be against me, against the Nian family. Under the pressure of Jing's eyebrows and eyes, he stared coldly at Sir Russian, his gloomy tone tempered with ice. I'm always a smart person who knows what I'm talking about. After hearing this, Sir Russian's face turned pale and he quickly nodded, hey, yes, yes. I know. Jing Heng threw the unfinished half of his cigarette out the window and bounced it onto Sir Russian's body, causing him to jump up in fright, looking very comical. Jing Heng sneered coldly, the car window closed, and Maybach flew away. As she walked into the villa, the icy cold water poured down on her. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Big things together, fish die and nets break. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Big things together, fish die and nets break. She couldn't avoid it in time, and her whole body was instantly drenched in soup. Shi Shanshan slammed the basin hard and said, bitch, you still have the face to come back. Shi Chu wiped his face and squinted his gloomy eyes as he looked at the ferocious and crazy Shi Shanshan. As if being choked by an invisible hand, Shi Shanshan's face turned pale and she took a step back in fear. Shi Chu's lips curled up with mockery, and Shi Shanshan could only be incompetent and furious. She didn't want to waste time with such a fool. Entering the living room, I found that Wen Shirlan was also there. It seemed that the mother and daughter were waiting for her to come back and ask for help. Wen Shirlan, sitting on the sofa, immediately became sharp and sarcastic when she saw it. At the beginning, you were so bold. We brought you back from the orphanage to provide you with food and shelter. When you climbed the pillar of Jing Heng, you forgot who you were. You heartless white-eyed wolf, dare to attack me in Shanshan. And still bewitching your father and Jing Heng to fall towards you, shameless fox spirit. Now, get out of the Shi family. Wen Shirlan thought that when she was kicked out of the Shi family at the beginning, without the title of Miss Shi, Jing Heng would definitely not marry her. Who would marry a rural girl who has no family? Drive her away. Faced with the domineering Wen Shirlan, Shi Chu calmly took out the report form and said, this is the blood sample report I did in the hospital. What did you do? You know in your heart that you need me to show it to Shi Russian. Seeing the report form in her hand, Wen Shirlan's face changed and her nails were deeply pinched into her flesh. How could this dead girl think of going to the hospital for a check? Up. Okay, at the beginning, you were still pretending. It seems that you had prepared everything for a long time and wanted to design a plot to frame me and my mother. Shi Shanshan rushed over and was about to grab the report from Shi Chu's hand. Unexpectedly, Shi Chu was already on guard, and on one side of her body, Shi Shanshan pounced in the air. Bitch, give me the report form. Shi Shanshan's expression twisted as she pounced towards Shi Chu. Shi Chu quickly dodged, and Shi Shanshan threw herself directly onto the ground, her nose hitting the marble floor. Ah! Shi Shanshan let out a pig-like howl in pain. Shanshan. Wen Shilan quickly rushed over to help Shi Shanshan up, only to find that her daughter's nose had collapsed. She glared fiercely at Shi Chu and said, "Bitch, if Shan destroys her face, I want you to pay for it." Shi Chu's eyes were clear and innocent as he gestured, "She fell on her own, what does it have to do with me?" Wen Shilan was completely angered by Shi Chuyan's indifferent attitude and rushed towards her like a madman. "I want to kill you for Shanshan. Stop it." When Shi Rushan came in, he saw Wen Shilan waving her teeth and claws, saying she wanted to kill Shi Chu. Wen Shilan had already lost her sanity, disregarding the obstacles of Shi Rushan and rushing to the front of Chu. At that moment, I didn't hide and just watched as Wen Shilan's sharp nails scratched towards my face. Pop. Without feeling the expected pain, she turned her gaze and saw Shi Rushan pinching Wen Shilan's wrist and slapping her in the face without hesitation. With great strength, Wen Shilan's face instantly swelled up. The pain woke her up, and she covered her face with tears filling her eyes. "Like a mountain, you hit me for this wild seed," she said. Shi Rushan was furious and said, "If you don't wake up, you don't even know what you're doing." Recalling Jing Heng's warning before leaving, he quickly went to check if Shi Chu had been injured. "Xiao Chu, haven't you hurt anything? Why are your clothes getting wet? Hurry up and change your clothes, don't catch a cold." At first, she frowned and was not used to the earnest concern from Shi Rushan. She avoided Shi Rushan's touch and made a faint gesture, saying, "I'm fine." "Dad. What's wrong with you? Why have you been favoring that wild seed time and time again?" "What kind of wild seed?" "She's your sister," interrupted Shi Rushan sternly. "But Dad, Mom and I are your family, you can't treat Mom like this." Shanshan. Wen Shilan also deeply felt the changes before and after the mountain, blocking the still debating Shanshan and giving her a wink. Shi Shanshan swallowed her words and believed that Wen Shilan would definitely be able to set the time like a mountain. Shi Rushan glanced at Shi Chu and then turned to Wen Shilan, his gaze dim and unclear. "Let's get divorced." "Divorce? Shi Rushan, are you crazy? She just came home a few days ago and you were completely lost in her thoughts." "No, I don't agree to divorce." "It's useless if you don't agree. After such a big play, I've seen both myself and Shanshan get involved. How to end it now, how others laugh at me like a mountain. No matter how much you say, it's useless. I've made up my mind." Shi Rushan's attitude is very firm. Shi Shanshan's suppressed emotions immediately erupted again, and Wen Shilan pulled her back. "At first, I was curious about what kind of play this family of three was playing, but on second thought, I was completely refreshed. There is more or less the handwriting of Jing Heng in this. Shi Rushan, don't forget that the company has been in operation for so many years, and all your hidden evidence is with me. If you dare to divorce me, I will hand it over. If not, we can all die together." Wen Shilan knew that talking too much was pointless, but when she thought about being kicked out of the Shi family, she and Shan couldn't live their future, and her face became grim as if she were breaking a mountain and a jar. Shi Rushan's face suddenly changed and he said, "Wen Shilan, do you dare to threaten me? It's you who doesn't want to leave a way out for my mother." Wen Shilan burst into tears and said, "It's okay for me to live a difficult life. What about Shanshan? She's your own flesh and blood. How could you be so cruel? Shi Shanshan has been living a luxurious life since she was young, and she will marry into a wealthy family in the future. If she loses the title of Miss Shi, how can she find a golden turtle husband? When she saw Russian, she was moved. When Shirlan softened her tone and said, Russian, I don't want you to do anything. As long as you don't divorce, I can apologize to Xiao Chu. Russian was forced by Wen Shirlan's leverage and had no choice but to agree, I can promise you, but tonight you must move out with Shanshan. Let's wait until Xiao Chu successfully marries last year's family. When she saw the situation, she made concessions like a mountain, and when Shirlan dared not take any further steps. If a fish died and a net was caught, she would not be able to gain any benefits. Xiao Chu, it was always me and Shanshan who were at odds before. When Shirlan pulled Shi Shanshan over to Chu's side, appearing to have lowered her posture, but deep hatred was hidden in her eyes. Shanshan, apologize, she said, Mom. Shi Shanshan didn't want to, and her resentful gaze wished to kill Shi Chu. Apologize. When Shirlan urgently grabbed Shi Shanshan, and Shi Russian let out a deep cough at this moment. Shi Shanshan only felt a chill behind her, glanced at Shi Chu, and said with white eyes, I'm sorry. At first, his eyes were bewildered, as if he didn't know what they were saying. What's wrong? The hotel situation is all a misunderstanding, and the incident just now. Xiao Chu, since we are always one family, let's turn big things into small ones. When Shirlan half concealed, and casually told Shi Russian about the hotel situation. After finally stabilizing Shi Russian, how could she possibly explain the situation at this moment? Xiao Chu, you are also a sensible person. These things are over now, don't make your father upset. It would be unfilial if we continue to argue about the meaning behind the scenes. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. How can such a big gift still be given? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 10. What if I regret? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. What if I regret, don't change. Shi Russian stared at Shi Chu's clothes, which had turned white from washing. How can we wear them like this? I don't know where the poor girl came from, but when she walked out, not to mention that she felt embarrassed, the wealthy family of Nian felt so disgusted when they saw her like this. What if they reneged on this marriage? Xiao Chu, even if you think it's nothing, you can't let the Nian family underestimate our Shi family. Those who don't know think I've treated you unfairly, and dressing well is also a kind of respect for the other party. At first, my eyes rolled and I wrote a sentence on the handwriting board. I don't have any other clothes, unless you give me money to buy them. Shi Russian's eyebrows and eyes relaxed, and he confidently took out a gold card and stuffed it into Shi Chu's hand. Buy whatever you want. Dress yourself up nicely, he said, fearing that Shi Chu wouldn't agree. Shi Russian instructed the butler to take Shi Chu to the shopping center. Century Shopping Center. It's here. The butler parked the car at the entrance of the mall, turned his head, and smiled kindly at Shi Chu. Miss, do you need me to send a bodyguard to follow you? She shook her head. She likes to be alone and is not used to having people around her. Okay, then you can go shopping alone and buy more things you like. Since Mr. has given you all the secondary cards, you don't have to feel embarrassed. Since Shi Shanshan and Wen Shirlan were sent out of the Shi family, the attitude of the servants of the Shi family towards Shi Chu has changed 180 degrees, showing great respect and fearing that they may not be well served. Shi Chu is not unaware of this. She nodded, opened the door, got off the car, and looked at the high-end and grand shopping center, curling her lips. Don't worry, she won't be stingy. Entering the mall at the beginning, a luxurious atmosphere rushed in. The counters of major brands are dazzling with exquisite and fashionable clothes, but the styles are similar and there is no desire to try them out. She was wandering aimlessly when her phone suddenly rang as she passed by a certain store. She took out her phone and glanced at it, frowned deeply, and stopped to prepare to reply to the message. Suddenly, a mocking female voice came in my ear. "Where did you come from? You're dressed like a beggar, and you dare to stand in front of our MN door. You probably don't want to come into our store to pick clothes, do you? TSK, don't you see if you can afford it?" Shi Chu looked up at the woman who was speaking, who was a clerk at the MN counter. Two salespeople gathered together and openly ridiculed Shi Chu. "This is the most luxurious national financial center in Kyoto, and the people who come here to shop are either wealthy socialites or high-ranking officials. For someone like her who is dressed in street vendors, she should go to the underground shopping mall across the river, where clothes are sold by weight and suitable for her. Oh my goodness, why hasn't she left yet? She shouldn't have come to beg, right? I guess he's deaf, or he's just having a brain problem." Listening to the humiliation of the two shop assistants, I didn't go up to argue at first. She is not cowardly or afraid of things, but has no time. It's just two small salespeople, she doesn't take it seriously. The current urgency is to handle her own affairs. At first sight, it seemed as if they had not heard it, and the salespeople felt dull and uninteresting. They were originally bored with work and happened to see Shi Chu standing at the store door, dressed differently from a wealthy person, deliberately using her as a pastime to pass the time. "Hey! Do you smell anything?" One of the shop assistants covered his nose. The other salesperson seemed to have no reaction and was a bit confused. "What's the smell?" The salesperson walked straight towards Shi Chu and casually leaned in front of her, sniffing and frowning. "Oh my God, what's the smell on you?" There was no perfume at the beginning. It was a natural body fragrance and the fragrance after bathing. But the salesperson put on an unbearable look and covered his mouth with disgust. "You just picked up the garbage and came out, right? It's sour and smelly, nauseous. So disgusting, I really want to vomit." At that moment, I put away my phone and looked at her coldly. But because she didn't speak, the salesperson felt that she was easy to bully and shamed her even more recklessly. "If you haven't talked for so long, you won't be a deaf and stupid ground beetle." Ha ha ha. Shi Chu squinted his eyes and stared at the clerk's quirky face, slowly lifting his hand. "If you feel nauseous, go to the restroom, it's suitable for you to stay there." A soft and delicate female voice suddenly sounded. At the beginning, he regained his fierce palm wind. The girl with short hair shoulder-high, wearing a black short skirt and snow-white legs, is walking towards them. The salesperson looked at the sweet and charming girl and said, "Which one of you? Are you her friend?" "Shoo, I don't even know you. Do you dare to continue working here?" The girl proudly lifted her chin. "That's right. With your service attitude, you're not even qualified to come to the shopping center to clean the restroom." The salesperson was angry and wanted to retort, but was stopped by another salesperson. She whispered in her ear and said, "She is the daughter of the Liao Group, Liao Mingzhu. The Liao Group has cooperation with our brand, and we can't afford to offend her." Upon hearing this, the salesperson turned pale in fear and quickly bowed to Liao Mingzhu, apologizing and saying, "I'm sorry, Miss Liao. I didn't recognize you because I didn't mean to contradict you. I'm sorry. Do you want to come into the store to pick clothes?" Liao Mingzhu snorted coldly, "Take out all the new products in your store and let her try them out." Obviously, she was referring to Shi Chu. Miss Liao spoke up, and the staff didn't dare to slack off at all. They immediately went into the store to get their clothes. Liao Mingzhu turned around and blinked at Shi Chu. "I was just trying on clothes at the neighboring store, and I heard them humiliating you there. I can't stand this kind of bullying. When they take out their clothes later, you can try them on. Whoever talks too much, I'll let them go." When she saw that she had been humiliated at first, she didn't dare to speak back. She must have been very timid and easily bullied, so she put aside the young lady's demeanor and tried to speak in a calm tone. Little did they know that initially, they wanted to take action. If it weren't for Liao Mingzhu's appearance, the salesperson would probably have been lying in the hospital. At that moment, she could feel Liao Mingzhu's kindness and took out the handwriting pad she carried with her, writing stroke by stroke. "Thank you, no need," she said. Liao Mingzhu widened her eyes slightly shocked as she looked at Shi Chu. Turns out she can't speak. Liao Mingzhu's heart seemed to be twisted by something, and she couldn't help feeling a little heartbroken. "I see you've been standing at the entrance of this store for a long time, so you probably really like the clothes in this store." Liao Mingzhu spoke as gently as possible, afraid of scaring her. "Don't feel embarrassed. If you like it, go try it. Don't worry, with me around, they won't laugh at you." The salespeople quickly took out the new products one by one and placed them in front of Shi Chu. "Which one you like, go try it on." Liao Mingzhu encouraged her to try. At the beginning, he still shook his head. "What's going on? I saw her writing on the handwriting board, the style is too tacky, the materials are too poor, and the workmanship is too rough." The salesperson who saw this line changed their faces, and some even wrote their dissatisfaction on their faces. A bumpkin who can't even afford a piece of fabric in their store, still mute, dares to comment on their clothes. They are an international brand. She even said that the clothes in their store were worthless. End of this chapter.